From the banks of the Colorado River in Lake Mead to the homes and businesses in Southern Nevada, welcome to Water Smarts, the podcast pumping from the heart of Las Vegas, where we engage with the experts who keep the water flowing throughout Southern Nevada. I'm Bronson Mack.
And I'm Zuelke. From how we treat it, deliver it, use it, protect it, and conserve it, the Water Smarts podcast is all about water in Southern Nevada. We hope to make you a little smarter about the one thing that keeps us all connected: water.
Hey, Crystal, how are you today?
Well, I'm surviving summer. How are you?
Well, I guess since we're both on this recording right now, we both survived summer. That is pretty good. What a crazy and brutal summer we had here in Southern Nevada. I mean, I got to assume with what we've heard from the climate scientists and what we've seen in the trend in warmer temperatures that we probably have a few more of these summers in our future. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely expecting it to just continue to get hotter. And it just came so much earlier this year. And I mean, of course, we know it gets hot in Las Vegas. That's what it does. But we're used to that in July and August. Usually June is a little bit more mild, but nope, not this year. It just showed up with a bang. I was like, yo, I'm here to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. Like straight out of the gates. But fortunately, we are now at that time of year where we're starting to get those autumn thoughts, those fall thoughts. You know, I've already started seeing some advertising where I'm seeing pumpkins and that fall aesthetic. And I think for a lot of us, it is a welcomed change getting out of the heat. But joining us today to talk about some great fall and winter landscape watering tips is Joey Lynn from Star Nursery. Joey Lynn is a certified arborist and horticulture expert, and she's here to share some of her recommendations for maintaining a healthy and water-smart yard through the cooler season. Joey Lynn, welcome back to the Water Smarts podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be back. It's really been a brutal summer, so this is the perfect timing to be able to just give some tips to everybody to help them get a little bit more confident about moving into fall and get their plants ready and adjusted and do some repairing. I think there's going to be a lot of repair that they're going to have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are going to get to that because you hit it right off the mark here. We had a crazy hot summer, and we've seen that impact within our own landscapes and within the trees and the plants. So as we get ready to start the fall season, Joey Lynn, what should people be doing in September and October to really maintain those healthy landscapes through fall?
Keep in mind that September 1st is the first day that we reduce our irrigation. That is the mandatory watering restrictions that we all abide by. And we're actually grateful to have those reminders and those guidances because plants don't need to be watered every single day. When we have trees and shrubs, their root systems are larger, so they really just need to be watered longer and infrequently. So that mandatory restriction that goes to 3 days a week really is appropriate as our evenings are getting cooler and it allows the plants to put on a healthier root system. In September as well is a great time to actually inspect your irrigation. As we move into each season, we need to be prepared for that season. And since fall is a relatively mild season, this is the perfect opportunity to check for any leaks, any broken lines, any emitters that have popped off or have dried up and clogged. We want to do that before we get into winter when we're only watering 1 day a week. In the fall, consider planting a vegetable garden. At Star Nursery, we have our tomatoes and peppers. We have a lot of great flowers that are going to be coming in. So you can actually be planting a flower garden right now, and that's exciting. Another thing to do is use a light fertilizer that's very low in nitrogen but high in phosphorus for everything that might be going dormant. So our roses go dormant. We have very large deciduous shade trees that are going to be going dormant. So if we give them a light fertilization right now, they're going to have enough healthy, good nutrients to really get into the winter in a healthy condition. Now's a good time also in the fall to plant those trees. You can be planting your large deciduous trees now, get them in the ground, allow them to put on some root growth before they go dormant. In that winter season, our soil does not get cold enough that they don't grow roots. So if we can get them established by the time spring comes and they start to blossom, they'll have a great root system and they'll be prepared for the summer. This fall is also going to probably be another high weed season. We've had our monsoons. It's been very, very dry. Here in the desert, when it's very dry, all of the native weeds blow in and they kind of settle in where we have irrigation. Doing a preventative, whether it be a pre-emergent, so that means it's something that we put over our ground and we allow it to suppress any weeds from even growing, or now's the time to mulch. Mulch is a great weed suppressant. And then also, this is the time to consider doing any conversions. The earlier that you can start that process and get that process completed, the healthier the plants are going to be and the better off you're going to be. And you'll be better prepared for next spring and next summer.
Well, so lots of great information. I know we'll be able to dive into some of this a little bit more, but you nailed it off the top when you were talking about what a brutal summer it's been. It feels like it's been going on forever. I think July was like the hottest month ever recorded in history here in Las Vegas. So our landscapes are definitely feeling it. But like you said, it's true that while it's still very hot in September, it does cool down at night. And so plants and trees that are using drip irrigation really just don't need as much water as people might think, even though it still feels very warm in September, especially. But what does that really mean, Joey Lynn, especially when we compare our plants and trees to how we water grass? Help our listeners understand what that difference is, why we should water our plants and trees differently, especially using drip irrigation versus grass that's watered by sprinklers.
Watering with a sprinkler system is a high volume approach to irrigation. That means that water comes out at a larger amount, at a high pressure. Lawn is a very small root system. That root system with that very fine blade needs a lot of water all at once, multiple times in the day, so that it doesn't dry out. Sprinkler irrigation, water is delivered at gallons per minute, and it is a complete coverage of that whole area. Every part of that lawn has to be touched with high pressure sprinkles of water. So it is a large area that is being hit with a large quantity of water. Drip irrigation is a reduced amount of water. There's a pressure reducer in the line that allows the water to come out at a very, very slow rate. And that rate is regulated by very brilliant pieces of equipment that are just an inch that are called emitters. And these emitters have what's called a pressure regulator in them as well. And they give the water gallons per hour. You can have an emitter that is a half a gallon per hour. That means that over 60 minutes, that's only going to put out a half a gallon of water. That is completely appropriate for small rooted plants. And our soils are very, very high in clay. When you have a high clay, we have water retention in our soil, meaning that the soil doesn't drain. So that gives us the opportunity to use lower output emitters, and we can water less frequently. We wouldn't want to water every day, especially if we're making these wonderful changes into more drought-tolerant plants or adaptive plants. These plants need to dry out. So we need time in between. So that's where the drip irrigation is so important. And it's a specific placement. So we place the emitters exactly where we want them versus a sprinkler that sprays to cover a larger area. We still want great coverage around our plants. Plants have a root system that is 360 degrees around that plant. So when we do irrigate, we want to make sure we have great coverage. One little emitter may not be enough, but multiple little emitters that run for a length of time. And as it pushes water down, the deeper we go in the soil, the more the water has the ability to spread out. And it gets to a level in our horizons. That's what we call different layers of our soil. And as we get in the lower horizons, our soil stays cooler and it stays moister. We don't have to water as frequently. And it really is a complete change in mindset. I have done more house calls this summer because people have killed their plants because they've overwatered. They didn't understand the soil that they have. They didn't understand the symptoms that they were having. The same symptom of a plant dying because it's dry is the same symptom of a plant whose roots are drowning in soil. Roots don't grow like a heat-seeking missile to find water. They only grow where there is water. So we need moisture in that soil. Then that root can grow, it can multiply, it can put on fine feeder roots. And even if we're concentrated just below that canopy, that root system under the plant will be healthy. It'll be a functioning root zone.
Joey Lynn, if I can just ask you a follow-up. You're talking about the drip system, getting that deeper watering with the drip system. The soils help retain that water deeper below the surface. And then that's almost like a little reservoir, right, for the plant to continue accessing water. And we don't have to refill that reservoir every single day for the plant or for the tree, depending on the season. And going into fall, you're allowed to water your grass 3 days a week. And our recommendation for trees and plants is 2 days a week. That seems like enough to be able to replenish that moisture reservoir, if you will, below soil, right?
Yes. Soil has to have organic matter in it, right? This is why mulching is so important. Soil should be like a dish sponge. When you wet a sponge and you fill it, if you don't squeeze it out, water's oozing, right? And all those little pores inside that sponge are filled with water. When we have a soil that drains, that's not overwatered, we want the pores in between that organic matter and that rock to be with oxygen. We water, we fill up that reservoir. Those are the pore spaces in between our soil matter. Then we allow it to dry up, and the oxygen helps push that water down deeper and that moisture stay. We never want water standing underneath. So that's why infrequent watering is best. And to go to the fact about 2 days a week of watering, it's really important that we are planting the proper plants. If we have a plant that is constantly stressed, so it's the wrong plant in the wrong place, it is going to require more. And then we're going to be less likely than to believe that we can water just 2 days a week when it comes to plants and trees, right? So it's this big whole approach to proper plant, proper placement, knowing what your soil is, and never overwatering.
So you've hit on so many valuable points there that I think people need to understand. And one of it is the overwatering, because I think that is a very common mistake, especially with someone who has a lot of desert landscaping and no grass at all. They don't realize they can still overwater because they think it's just a minimal amount of water coming out. The second good point that you brought up is really this plant selection and what kind of plants you have in your landscape. So October is one of my favorite month here. I think everybody loves October because the weather is just pretty perfect. And that's when we want to start planting. You want to plan now and get things in that time frame. So when is exactly the best time to plant, Joey Lynn? And then what favorite trees or plants would you suggest, particularly those that are meant for our desert climate or that will do the best here on that minimal amount of water?
That is such a tough question because there's so many really, really great things that I love. Even as early as the beginning of October is really a good time, especially if you're getting mums. I mean, mums are a really great plant here. They do very well. They are perennial. So if you have a well-protected area with morning sun, it's great through all holidays. There's tons of colors. Tomatoes and peppers are so popular. We always think about them in the spring, but here in the desert, spring is too short. So now is the time if you wanted to experiment with spinach or kale. You can do strawberries right now, actually, and just put some straw or cover with a nice protective cover over the winter. There's really no limit in your herbs and your leafy greens if you have a protected area. So I say try it. Just try whatever you want. Now is a great time. Broccoli happens now. Our beets happen now. There's a lot to explore in the garden. With the flowers, something that happens in late October that we get are cyclamen. Cyclamen are a beautiful flower that come in reds and purples and pinks and whites. And you can plant them in October and you will have them through Valentine's Day. Geraniums, we've got marigolds. As far as trees, I love the Texas mountain laurel. Texas mountain laurel is a great plant, can be kept small. It is evergreen. It gets a beautiful flower in the spring. It's a slow grower. It can tolerate the heat. It is very low water. I love that. If you have a small yard, I think that that is a really great tree. Another really great tree is the vitex, the chase tree. That is a brilliant little tree that works so hard and performs so well. It does go dormant, so you would want to get it in the ground now. Use some root stimulant. Make sure you get some fall growth before it goes into dormancy, and then by spring, it'll just explode.
Great tips there on plants and trees that work out really well right now, getting those into your yard. But Joey Lynn, as we've talked a little bit about fall and a little bit about winter, you know, that winter watering restriction begins November 1st, the day after Halloween, going to 1 day a week. You'll stay at 1 day a week through February. With that, Joey Lynn, you can run your drip irrigation once a week, but do plants and trees, and I know we've talked a little bit about this already, but do they need more watering than once a week? You mentioned that some of them might only need watering like twice a month. And that can be kind of hard for us to sort of understand or even program our irrigation clocks for. Just on the general masses, 1 day a week watering, what are your thoughts there?
I like 1 day a week. I think because we have a mix in our yards, everybody has a mix. I think that the ideal situation is when irrigation systems go in, the first thing that they discuss with their designer is that the trees have their own valve. They have their own zone so that they can be on a separate program. That's why having a smart clock is so important, or an irrigation controller is so important, because when a system is set up right, you can do those things, right? So big, large trees that are dormant really could just have a great soaking, long and deep, twice a month, depending on what that is. If it's on drip irrigation with everything else, once a week is fine, but we don't want to overwater. If you have palm trees, for winter, you're going to turn off the water completely for palm trees. Palm trees, yeah, they don't need, I know you look shocked. Palm trees do not need to be on a regular irrigation schedule through winter. They don't grow in the winter. The only time we water palm trees is when they are in their growing season. Their growing season is May through September. That's why winter, we should turn the water off. They're very susceptible to root rot. Another is cacti, very susceptible to root rot. Remember, we talked about the fact that our soil is mainly clay. So if we have a plant that is not in its growing season, it is slowing in its growth or even dormant, those root systems are not functioning with the thought in mind, I need to grow. I need to put on growth. So they're just kind of laying mellow. Another is our succulents. They have the ability to hold water into them and not use anything and go into actual dormancy. People don't realize that succulents will go into a dormancy, stop their growth completely, and then when the season fits them, it works for them and they start to grow. It's important to know that plants have their seasons. It's a temperature and daytime hours and nighttime hours that tells the plant when they're functioning and when they're not. When we have longer nighttime hours, shorter daytime, the plants don't need all that water in the roots to try to function all day long.
So Joey Lynn, even though we said we don't get the freezes like a lot of other places, we do get colds and plants do need to be protected. There are some that are more cold sensitive than others. So what advice do you have for people to take care of those plants in the wintertime?
Any plant that is cold sensitive, like your tropical plants, citrus, so your lemons, your oranges, even some cacti, they need to have some kind of a protection on them. You would cover with burlap, and really it's only on the nights that we expect a freeze. If we are getting low in our temperatures and a freeze is expected, that night you will go out, cover the plant. You can cover it with burlap. We sell insulating fabric that can just be draped over. If you have sensitive palms, like a queen palm, we actually sell what's called a palm parker that you would wrap the heart of the palm. Palm trees do freeze. The days that we have a freeze, you can keep all of your covering on. But if we have days where we're back and the sun is out and the sun is shining, and even if we're in the low 40s, high 30s, you can take that protective coverings off of the plant. You don't want the plant to swelter. Anything that is frost tender that is in a container, you can just roll those right on into your garage and just open the garage up for some sun or just leave them in there. Herbs and vegetables, we have things that are called hot caps. There are these little plastic domes, or you can take an old milk jug, cut the bottom out, put it over your vegetables, and just get through those cold frozen nights. What happens on those frozen nights is the moisture that's in the leaf or the plant part actually expands, freezes, bursts the plant part, and that's when we have damage. Also, don't forget, you will cover your pipes. That's our backflow. That has a little area up in the bell that has water that accumulates up in there. And if water gets in there and we have a freeze, that water will expand, explode, and that's a very expensive plumbing irrigation repair. So you can buy frost protector. It's this little envelope that slides right on top. And much better than just wrapping with a blanket, although that does help too. And then don't forget your hose bibs. Anything that's brass coming out of your house that would accumulate water, get those covered so that the water doesn't expand and we have big repairs later.
As we've mentioned, we're in a desert. This is not the Midwest. We're not snowed in for days, and that snow covers our landscapes. And that is really a hard transition for a lot of people that move here from somewhere else. I know one of our producers on here has talked about how his dad came from a different place, and when he came here, he never had to use an irrigation clock. These are new things for a lot of people. So when it comes to, these reminders about how different we need to water things here, it's really important to get that message out that even though it's cold here, our landscapes go dormant just like they do everywhere else. So things may look dead, but they're not. They're just taking their winter nap. They'll come back in the spring. But if you're impatient and you love to have color year-round in your yard, I know you talked about some things like mums and some other flowers. What are some other things people can plant in their yards to give them that year-round color if they're really, really desperate for that in the wintertime, since we don't have the snow and we can see our landscapes? And maybe any other vegetables or plants or anything else that you really highly recommend that will get people through our cold season?
A really great thing to do is to visit Star Nursery or any of your local nurseries to see what they have, first of all. A good nursery is going to put out the seasonal stuff that's going to get you from one season to the next. There are things that are called annuals. Annuals are plants that they're growing and they're flowering one time. Once they bloom and they send out their seed, that's it for the season. There are things that are perennials. Perennials are those things that will come back each year, just like the mums that I was talking about. But a really great plant, something that you don't think of normally, is something like the Dusty Miller. The Dusty Miller is white, very, very velvety leafed plant that in the spring gets a yellow flower. So even though we may not have flowers all winter, we can do things like the ornamental kale that all through winter change colors. They're very pink and they're purple and they're constantly changing throughout the season. Pansies are great for color. A lot of these things that are seasonal, like a Tacoma bell, depending on their variety, they have the ability to keep their flowers all season long if we're mild. Gazanias are a great ground cover. They give a beautiful flower every morning, this very spiky, pointy, colorful flower that you can put in the ground now in the fall. They're all very fall colors, and that will get you through, even through spring and summer. Now, the dwarf oleander is a variety that is not heavy pollen. So it's the varieties that have been created so that they don't fall into a high pollen count. Everything that is sold is appropriate for our valley, and the oleanders can put on blooms all year long. If they get stressed or they're in an extreme temperature for a short period of time, we might see a decrease in the volume of flower, or we might see the size of the bloom that's affected. But we just know that with some root stimulant, light fertilizing throughout the season can help encourage more growth in all of that.
Wow, Joey Lynn, I mean, you've just talked through a number of different plants, and I know you're only scratching the surface on all the wonderful plants that do really well here in Las Vegas. You mentioned Star Nursery, great resource there. The local nurseries here, very knowledgeable staff. Before I get into resources, let me just ask you one other thing, pruning. Right? I just had my privet tree in my front yard pruned. It's diseased. It's not doing real well. So I'm kind of just nursing it along a little bit, trying to keep it as healthy as I can. But I just had to prune off some dead branches. There were pretty significant pruning that we had to do there, which I'm sure is going to affect the tree over the long term. But in general terms, you've got a healthy tree. Talk to us just briefly. Give us a couple tips on pruning, if you would.
Fall is great for pruning any plant that has been exposed to full sun and has sun damage. Fall is the time to do that. So you're doing well by doing that. At any time, any plant that has dead or diseased plant parts should be removed. So if it is dead and it is brittle and there is no scraping the bark and seeing any cambium or green or moisture, that can be removed at any time. When we talk about our roses or we talk about our trees that are deciduous, that go dormant, we want to wait until January. January is the time that you will do all of your very heavy pruning. It's after the extreme cold and before those plants go into bud. Pruning for shaping, massive pruning for control of growth or height. For anything that goes dormant, it is safe to do it in January. Fall, now we're just cleaning the canopy. We're getting out any dry, diseased, burnt leaves. We're allowing new growth to be put on, and that is going to happen right now as the temperature comes down. At that same time, you can give a light fertilizer, do a starter fertilizer like our Stardust, or you could use Dr. Q's Plant Tonic, which is a root stimulant. Anytime we prune, we want to give the plant something back. The plant knows it's had a reduction. After pruning, plants put on response growth. It could be a negative response growth because we've over pruned and the plant is trying to restructure itself, or it could be what I hope is a healthy, natural response, which is the plant putting on leaf growth so that it can create more chlorophyll, so that it can photosynthesize. And that's the goal of pruning, the cleaning it out, shaping it, and any major restructuring, we do want to wait until January for anything that's gone dormant. As our seasons have gotten more extreme in the heat and less extreme with the cold, a lot of insect populations and diseases are not going dormant. They're not being killed out. So January is when we'll do our horticulture oil, we'll do our fungicides and all that. And we can do light pruning and some light insecticides now if necessary.
Again, a lot of great information here. It may feel a little overwhelming. keep in mind there are a lot of resources that are out there for you. Joey Lynn and all of the folks over at Star Nursery, very knowledgeable, and all of our local nurseries really have great staff that are there to help you. Also visit snwa.com. You can get watering tips there. You can gain access to the Southern Nevada Regional Plant List and the plant search. Don't know what kind of plants to install? One thing you can do is take a look at the Regional Plant List. With those resources that are out there, which are abundant, what am I missing, Joey Lynn? What other resources do folks have?
The University of Nevada Cooperative Extension, the Master Gardener program, is a phenomenal program. They are our local volunteers that get out into the gardens in the community. Also on their campuses, they do the experiments. They do all the work so that they can give us the practical information and the good knowledge. Our Springs Preserve is a phenomenal working botanical garden with the master gardeners that go there as well. We have a great thing called the internet. I always recommend that if you do any research, make sure that you're looking at a .org or an educational site that is a Master Gardener program, but is something suited for the desert Southwest. You mentioned Star Nursery. We are extremely proud of the fact that we have what's called a Nevada Nurseryman program. We certify our employees. They go through a certification through the University of Nevada Cooperative Extension to receive this certificate. You can go on to every one of our properties, speak directly with a store manager, or look for the little Nevada button that we wear, that they've gone through the program and they're prepared to help you. I do have to say that Star Nursery is proud to partner with the Tree Bait, and at all of our local nurseries, all of the trees that are part of the Tree Bait now have signage and stickers so that the homeowner can walk in, know what trees are recommended and part of that Tree Bait. We're also very proud to partner with you with the Smart Controller rebate. So fill out the paperwork, bring it to the register, and we will help with all those rebates as well.
Great resources there. Reference to additional programs, the Tree Bait program. If you're doing a landscape conversion, you can head on over to Star Nursery. You can find those trees that qualify for that rebate. You'll get an extra $100 for every new tree that you install as part of your landscape conversion. And then, of course, those smart irrigation clocks. I have one. I set my irrigation clock through the app on my phone. Everybody should be taking advantage of that. We'll give you a discount on the cost of that smart controller. You can visit Star Nursery, visit snwa.com, find other resources there for those rebates. Joey Lynn from Star Nursery, thank you so much for joining us once again here on the Water Smarts podcast and really helping to educate our community about fall and winter watering and plant selection.
Well, thank you for having me. It is an honor, and I'm just so grateful that you had me on. I'm so passionate about getting to every homeowner here and letting them know that they can make a difference.
Well, Crystal, another great episode with a ton of information. Joey Lynn is so passionate and so knowledgeable. I really enjoy chatting with her.
I love hearing from her because she's such an expert, first of all, on everything that she's talking about, and so helpful in just really breaking down what feels complicated to a lot of people. And I love that they make house calls through Star Nursery because I think that is such a great resource for people in the community that are just really struggling and don't know what to do, and maybe don't have a landscaper that comes out, every month to check on things and just learn how to set your irrigation clock.
And if you think about it, if you have a tree that's undergoing some stress or you're concerned about, you can't take the tree into Star Nursery and go, hey, what's going on with my tree, right? You need Star Nursery to come to you. So that is amazing that they do house calls. I find that just an outstanding service. And where else can you really get that level of expertise where somebody's going to come and give you the quality time to walk through not just the one tree that you may have, but any other concerns or questions that you might have about your landscaping. Great resource there from Star Nursery.
Yeah, absolutely. And I learned so much just listening today. I think I've talked about this a couple times on the podcast, but we just installed a new landscape. We redid our backyard. It wasn't a conversion. It was already landscaped, but it was done before we moved in. So it was time for a refresh. A lot of things had died off. We have pets, and our kids who were younger kind of damaged some of the stuff back there, but they're older now. They're not using it like they used to. And so it was a good time for us to reimagine what we wanted our backyard to be. And we put in all desert landscaping plants. Everything's on drip irrigation. We put in a big shade tree. And the timing, with fall being the ideal time, we started this back in February. I started consulting landscape companies. The timeline I got was we'll be able to do it late August. So we were like, perfect, going into fall. This is going to be good timing. And they kept moving the timeline up. No fault of their own, just things change, right? Before I knew it, we were putting the landscape in May. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to get through summer. This is going to be brutal. I was really worried. And then literally the weekend they finished was that first 120-degree week we had.
Oh, get out of here. You must have just been like, okay, well, there goes our investment.
But I was so concerned. But I'll tell you what, I followed SNWA's guidelines on the website when you install a new landscape. We watered anywhere between 4 and 5 days a week with the drip in the backyard. And then we pulled off because we noticed that was enough. And we hand watered. I just would at night, I'd go out when it was cooler, 100 degrees, but the sun wasn't blazing. And I would just hand water stuff. And we just did that. And you know what? We haven't lost one plant. Everything looks amazing. Little dry, not going to lie. But I mean, they're surviving it and they're doing okay.
But that's because of the care that you gave them, right? You put in a little foresight into recognizing you just installed these plants in summer. They are not established yet. Right. And I assume that you started looking at, hey, how do I maintain these plants and get them established so they will be healthy for many years to come? And it sounds like you've done those things and maybe you're out of the woods then in those plants. I still have some plants that are mature that just did not do so well this summer. But I know it's not because of the watering. It's because the plants were not tolerant of the heat. And just because a plant is drought tolerant doesn't mean that it's heat tolerant. And with the excessive heat that we had and that we will likely have in summers ahead, I probably have some decisions I need to make with some of those plants and replacing them for something that would be able to withstand the heat a little bit more.
Yeah. And so before we go, Bronson, I just want to say that a good thing to do is look at the SNWA plant search tool because it will help you identify plants that are heat and drought tolerant. Go to the nursery, walk through, talk to them. And also, the Springs Preserve has its fall plant sale coming up September 21st. It's a great place to go and talk to other experts and horticulturists and purchase the appropriate plants for your landscape. So all of those things are super helpful.
Good plug there. September 21st, the plant sale over at the Springs Preserve. You can visit springspreserve.org for more information on that. And that's it for this episode here on the Water Smarts Podcast. We hope you subscribe and don't forget to listen next time. And if you like the show, give us a rating. We'll take it. It helps us to reach more Southern Nevadans with this important water message. And if you'd like more information about conservation, water quality, new technologies, and everything that you need to stay water smart, you can find all of that information and resources on our website at snwa.com. That's snwa.com. And we'll see you here next time on Water Smarts.